910, Big 550, KTRS. Yesterday, the big story was that the football stadium, or the Dome Authority, has $800,000 in contracts so far in researching how to build the stadium. That story came from the legwork from our next guest, David Hunn, writer for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Good morning, David Hunn.
Hello, how are you?
We're great. This probably was not an easy story to track down.
You know, it took a little doing. I am building a relationship with the attorneys for the Edward Jones Dome. I think that I haven't dealt with them a lot in the past. I don't know how much work they've done with public records. But so, for instance, at first, they actually redacted all of the contents of the invoices. So I had to talk to them about, like, hey, guys, you got to, don't redact anything, meaning don't black out anything unless there's a legal reason to black it out. So, yeah, it took a little bit of time.
And so did you have to file a Freedom of Information request? Or
yeah,
you just...
all of this came through public records. All of it was through Missouri Sunshine Act requests. And, I give the lawyers credit. They were responsive within the law.
Now, just in terms of news gathering, how does that work? You have lawyers at the newspaper that you sort of work with that say, we want this, and they file a formal request, and then you get it at some point?
No, I file them directly.
You do? Okay.
Because I'm a lot cheaper than the lawyers that we...
Gotcha.
For the Post-Dispatch, to be very blunt.
Okay, gotcha. All right. No, well, that makes sense. Okay. One of the interesting things that comes out of this is that it seemed like the clock was ticking in terms of some of these fees before they were actually approved by the board. Yeah,
that is an interesting part of this. So, without pointing fingers of blame, I think we were all led to believe that these services were all kind of gratis to start with. We knew that they. I mean, let me give everybody due. We knew that they would be paid at some point. But what we didn't know was that they were already on the clock in December, and so that's news for sure. And I think that we had to point that out.
Right. What I took from this is, and you're probably best, you come on when you write these stories and we talk about it, but Governor Nixon has said that this process has been ongoing, and didn't just start when Stan Kroenke announced that he was building the stadium in Los Angeles. However, there are no bills that anybody was doing anything that they were being paid for.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, and we're learning this slowly, is that guys like Dave Peacock, and maybe just Dave Peacock at first, were working on this, more than a year ago. I mean, they were thinking, City Hall was thinking about this. They were trying to figure out how to get this done. There's a lot of criticism out there that they didn't move fast enough, and I think there's some validity to that. But they were working on it. It's not fair to say they weren't working on it.
Right. Okay. So $800,000, is that it's? I don't know if that's too much or too little or about right, or I don't know if I'm offended by this story.
Well, here's what's important to know. I think that if you take nothing else out of this, what you need to take away is that this money is coming out of the funds that currently pay for the Edward Jones Dome, meaning they set aside $4 million a year to pay for upkeep on the Jones Dome. They have $20 million a year, from the state, city, and county that goes to paying off the bonds. We still owe $100 million on the Edward Jones Dome. This money is coming out of those accounts, that account. So that it's going to have to be backfilled. Somebody's going to have to figure out how to make up that money, because that money is taken. It's called,
Right. If nothing else happens, they have an $800,000 hole in their budget
so far, and
right.
We know that they have contracted for $40 million so far. Now that's not money billed. If the stadium doesn't get built, they won't be billed for all of that. But if the stadium does get built, Jim Shrewsbury, the chair of the board for the Edward Jones Dome, said that the $800,000 so far is roughly what they expected, and that is going to keep rising.
Right, and it's all important because they've said, if we don't get a team or we don't get a commitment, we're not going to build a stadium. But how much money are we going to spend to get ourselves in a position to be able to make a bid on a team which we might not get?
Well, let's just think this through for a quick second. I haven't done this yet, so forgive me the thinking out loud. But this started in January. So it's now April. Well, no, it's now May.
Right.
So we've gone through January, February, March, April. That's 4 months. That's $800,000 in 4 months. We've got through November before they make a decision. So we've got all summer. We've got what, 6 more months?
Right.
So figure we're at least another 800,000.
Right. So $1.52 million.
Perhaps much more
to make a bid on a stadium we may or may not build.
Yeah. And if we build it or if we don't build it, this money will need to be backfilled. We still have to pay for the Edward Jones Dome. I mean, that roof is going to need to be replaced. It has parts of it have been replaced. They have Wi-Fi issues. They have constant upkeep that they need. I'm not saying that this stuff isn't surmountable.
Right.
They are going to figure it out. Somebody's going to figure it out because they're going to have to. But if nobody does, we're left with a dome that desperately needs upkeep and doesn't get it.
Right. I thought the money that was being generated by the hotel tax was bringing in a significantly more money than what they originally thought.
I haven't looked at those numbers in a long time, but it covers the St. Louis County and St. Louis City portion of the Edward Jones Dome.
Right.
So that's a great question. You know what? I'll look into it.
Okay. All right, good. And then this quote by Jim Shrewsbury, which is interesting, as you mentioned. This is a gamble. It's not a reckless gamble, but it's a gamble.
Yeah. He's really straightforward, and I really appreciate that about him. He does not – I have never known him to beat around the bush.
Right.
So, he's saying, listen – He's saying, A, we have to backfill this money, and B, we don't know if this is going to work.
Yeah. So where are we in all of this? People keep yelling at me on Twitter and in person and in the produce aisle.
What's yelling in Twitter? Is it all caps?
Yeah, well, it's yelling in Twitter if you have 2 followers and you're yelling at me.
Okay. And in the produce aisle, really?
Right. So the argument is clearly full steam ahead for Stan Kroenke. He has all the governmental entities not standing in his way in California. He doesn't need the NFL approval. He can build this stadium. He has enough money. He has the land. He has everything going on. This Carson project, nobody's really stepped up to pay for it. Nobody's really stepped up to agree to do it. And yet a lot of people are saying only one, as Roger Goodell said yesterday, only one stadium is going to be built in Los Angeles.
So my understanding is Carson is actually catching up to Kroenke.
Okay.
Now here's the hard part about all of this, right? Is all these projects are private, so we only learn of them at these small snapshots when something comes out publicly. Maybe they need to go to council for something. Maybe they need to file a paper. Maybe they come out and say where they stand. So we haven't heard from Kroenke in how long?
Oh shoot! Since he
said he was building a stadium in Inglewood.
Well, he didn't even speak then. The last time we actually heard from him is during a news conference where I want to say Jim Thomas asked him, or somebody asked him about a stadium, and he said, "I put a lot of jack into this town," which is going back 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
But
so my point is that it looks like Carson is actually catching up.
Okay.
The Raiders and Chargers have committed. They do have the funds.
Okay.
Raiders don't have lots of money, but Chargers have funds.
Right.
Carson City Council has approved. In fact, Carson City Council did the same thing that Inglewood City Council did.
Okay.
Those councils had 2 choices. This is going to sound very familiar.
Mm-hmm.
They could either put it to a vote of the people,
right, or
just decide on their own that it was okay.
Right.
Guess which they chose.
They decided to do it on their own.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So Carson just did that too a few weeks ago.
Okay.
So that project is now actually gaining some steam. It would look like it is catching up to Kroenke. I'm really hesitant to say that because we don't know what Kroenke's done since we last had a public vote, since Inglewood last came out and said something about it.
Right.
So it is very possible that he is well far ahead at this point. It looks like they are about even.
What did we learn since Peacock, who was doing this pro bono, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I've seen no bills to the authority in Peacock's name, so I'm not seeing any evidence of him being paid, and he is saying that he is not being paid, so I'll take him at his word.
And Bob Blitz was not being paid, but his law firm is doing some work on this.
Yes. So Blitz is not billing his time, but Blitz is a partner in Blitz, Barjay, and Deutsch. Forgive me if I
butcher those names.
Destroyed that name, yeah.
Right.
But that firm is actually the second highest paid. HOK, the architects are first, nearly $400,000, and Blitz's firm is getting about $175, something like that.
Okay, so they went to the NFL and gave their presentation. Then they did a car wash, if you will, and sat and talked to all the media around town. What did we learn from either that presentation or their conversation after they came back and told us?
Well, we learned that from their perspective, things are going along exactly as they should. At least that's what they're saying out loud.
Right.
So they went to the NFL last week. They talked to the NFL. The NFL is interested. I think the most important thing that I took away from last week's events, them going to the NFL, them going to New York, them talking to this now infamous owners committee, the Committee on Los Angeles Opportunities, right, which is going to be making this decision, including the one in St. Louis.
Okay, I think that's important. What's the name of the committee again?
Right. The Committee on Los Angeles Opportunities.
Okay.
Right. So I mean, this is very clear at this point. Whatever we were worried that we didn't know a year ago, we know.
Okay. So
Kroenke wants to go to L.A.
Right.
NFL wants a team or more in L.A.
Right.
I mean, that is where this momentum is headed. So the question is just which team. So what we learned last week was that the city of San Diego did not present in New York.
Okay.
And the city of Oakland did not present in New York. And that is important.
Okay.
Peacock and Blitz and that team and Nixon's office all talk about how they are front runners in this game. I think they're right. I think they are front runners in among the local markets. Mm-hmm. Their competition isn't that. Their competition is Kroenke and Carson.
Right. So it's sort of coming to a head in a sense where every plan has got a good, a positive, and a negative. It's almost like a rock, paper, scissors game.
Well, the Oakland plan has more negatives.
Oakland doesn't have a plan.
Not much of one.
Right. But including even some people say when you move around the chess pieces, people say, okay, great, Oakland, when the music stops, Oakland doesn't have a stadium or a town, so they'll move to St. Louis.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting. I mean, I think there's so many issues if that happens, right? Would the Davises still own the team? They're Californians. I'm not sure. Would there be ownership possibilities here?
Right.
If a team came to St. Louis and needed owners, who would own it? There's so many question marks on that point.
So right, and would there be a swap? Would Kroenke buy the Raiders and the Raiders buy the Rams, and they just swap, and then he moves the team to L.A. and
I mean, I don't even know how
that actually has been done before with the Rams. The Rams,
really?
Yes, and my memory's going to fail me, but it has to do with Carl Rosenblum.
Somebody just talked to me about this yesterday. The Colts or something?
It was the Colts, and it was Carl Rosenblum, and it was the Pete Rozelle, who was the first commissioner of the NFL.
I was talking with our food critic, Ian Frobe, who is incredible.
Yeah.
And he was talking about this very issue. He actually is quite the NFL buff.
Huh.
Yeah, who'd have thunk? Smart guy. What do they call that, a Renaissance man?
And we have terrible food at the Dome. Maybe he can do something about that.
Oh, I'm sure he will. Have you read his reviews? They are at times scathing.
Yes.
They're incredible.
And he just did the 50 great restaurants here in town,
100
right?
maybe.
100
very interesting.
Yeah.
So you asked where do we stand, right? And I think the big question mark is what's going to happen with city funding? How much of a fit is the legislature going to throw for state funding?
Right.
They have suggested now, I mean, last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, they said they're not going to stop the kind of quote-unquote bond extension that Nixon suggested.
Correct.
Right. So now we're really, I think the flashpoint is the city. Mm-hmm. So today, this morning, Jeanette Mott Oxford, who is a former legislator, and one of the original citizens who put together that law that requires a public vote in the city, along
with former Post-Dispatch reporter
Fred Lindicki.
Right.
So she and a couple other citizens filed a intervention suit, or they intervened in the suit that the RSA, that the Dome Authority filed against the city. God, I feel like every time I talk about this, it's so I don't know how people follow it.
Right. Well, that's why you're here. That's why you get paid. But that's half the beauty of it. They do it so that it's a shell game, so no one really knows what the other hand's doing.
Yeah, just stop me if I need to repeat anything.
No, you're good. You're good. I'll let you know.
So she and others have now filed to intervene in the suit, and their point is, again, they're urging the judge to say that there has to be a vote in the city. Sorry.
Okay.
And I think that's where the flashpoint is now, because the city money is now key. So now we're, again, catching us all up. We know that Nixon has told the St. Louis County executive, Steve Stenger, that his county will not be involved at this point.
Right.
So there doesn't have to be a public vote in the county.
Right.
Obviously, they were worried that wouldn't pass, I think with good reason.
Right.
The city's a different animal. So, or it's just a very interesting spot. I have to be honest, McGraw, I wonder if Mayor Francis Slay had said, and maybe he couldn't have. I don't know. I haven't talked to him about it. I should. But if he had said in January, I'm behind this. I think this is a great plan.
Right.
And I think that we should vote in the city immediately. I mean, those guys probably could have gotten it passed.
Yeah, I don't see that.
You don't?
No, I don't. And I was talking to, I don't know if it was you or somebody else, and we were having a conversation. I don't think a vote of a new stadium with tax dollars passes any municipality.
I'm not sure. So here's what you got in the city that you don't have in the county, right? Well, I mean, this is going to sound stupid, but you have the actual redevelopment is happening in the city.
Yes.
So this is the redevelopment of a chunk of land that had high hopes and lots of failed and restarts.
Yes,
you know?
but this is also the Lendicky ballot initiative passed in the city just as well as the county. Now, it passed more in the county than the city.
Far more. I mean, in the city, it was closer to like 55-45, something like that.
Okay.
In the county, it was like 75-25.
Right.
I mean, it was,
so, I mean, I just think that look at how much trouble What's-His-Face had up in that North County redevelopment. McKee, yeah.
Yeah, but different project, right? I mean, he did it, that kind of came out slowly. It seemed very secretive.
Right.
Listen, I want... As a reporter, I want Dave Peacock and Bob Blitz to be more transparent.
Right.
I want them to be more clear about where they're going. I want them to tell me more about what's going on. I'm not naive. I understand they can't do that in every case. That said, McKee was completely not transparent.
Right.
I mean, we didn't know anything about what his plans were.
But he was trying to buy land, and so you don't want to tell, hey, by the way, I'm buying land.
So are these guys.
Well, that's why they haven't bought the land yet.
No, they've optioned, though.
They've optioned
a lot of it, yeah. In fact, I think that they need to give us those records, too. I hope that they do.
Yeah.
I mean, I think those are public records just like everything else
So
is.
what's the next step here?
Yeah, so I really think that we now have to wait and see what happens in the courts. I expect that to be brought to the judge quickly.
Okay, so really any day now here.
I expect that, fully.
Yeah. So it might come down to a judge deciding whether or not it goes to a vote of the people.
Yes,
yeah.
I think it does. Now, and what's interesting to me is, I mean, I guess the what-if scenario is stupid because it's over.
Right.
But I just can't help but wonder if people had been super aggressive early.
Yes.
If this wouldn't have been taken care of already.
Or just gave Kroenke the land and said, you develop it any way you want.
That's an interesting... So, okay, pause there for a second.
Hold that thought. Can you?
Yes, sir.
Do you have time to stick around through a break?
Sure.
Dave Hunn with us, St. Louis Post-Dispatch, a reporter covering the stadium issue. He's the one who broke the story about $800,000 so far being spent on trying to get the plan ready for the NFL to decide. All of that. We'll talk to Dave Hunn more here on the Big 550 KTRS.